Hello, 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 everyone. How's it going? Hi, hi, hi. Welcome to part 3 of building a Chrome extension where we are using React, bit of Express, of and a ton of more things to build a Chrome extension that we can then add to our project and just take it around. A quick description before we begin. uh, that would be, what are we trying to build? We are building a Chrome extension which would be very similar to one of the tools available out there, raindrop.io, but this is more developer focused. So it will allow you to save links, it will allow you to save question and answer, it will allow you to save code snippets, and you can reference it for future needs, any future things that you go to. It's kind of like your own personal uh, notepad. So kind of a shareable to-do list as someone, but instead of to do, it's done list. So shareable done list. Okay. And yeah, that's what we are building as part of these sessions. I have like 6 sessions. Two of them are done. This is the third session, and we have 3 more to go. And by the end of it, I'm hoping to complete all of the features that I have listed out here. Okay. So let's see. Yep. Good morning. Good morning. For me in the UK, it is 11 a.m., 11ish a.m. So an early start on Sunday, definitely, but not that early, I would say. And if you're joining me just right now and you haven't registered for the session, please, please, please do register for the session. The link is in the chat. So please do register for the session. This helps me, helps you, helps everyone at MLH know that you had joined the sessions. It helps us know that uh, when we have to give you points, it just like, yeah, helps everyone, helps you, helps me, helps MLH. That's my tagline. Right. So please do register for the session. And if you're again joining me for the very, very, very first time, a quick intro about me. Hi, my name is Utkarsh, but I go by UT. That's what you would see somewhere on the screen at some point. Let me see. If I stop my camera, oh, apparently the name tag is hidden today. Uh, but yeah, and I am a coach at MLH. I love to stream. I completed my 60th stream yesterday. So this is my 61st stream. Very hyped up about it. Ever since I completed like my 50 streams. Uh, Oof. Okay. So that's how it gets changed. Oh, nice. Anyways, ever since I completed my 50th stream, I'm pretty pumped up for the remaining ones. Okay. So, yeah, without any further ado, let's get started. So, once again, if you have not caught up on session 1 and session 2, you can get all the code on my GitHub account. So, the link is again in the chat. You could create your own, or you can fork this one and then clone that and make changes to that. Uh, Oh, seems like I've got 2 stars, which is nice. Really helpful. Really ups my morale there. Uh, yeah. Other than that, as I was saying, that you can fork this or you can just copy paste the whole thing. What have we done so far? We have successfully created a backend where we created some models or schemas interchangeably used, some routes. We got our server up and running. We also did API testing using hopscotch.io. Let me open that. So these are all the routes that we created and we tested. So yeah, we have pretty much come ahead in our project. We started with the front end. Okay, we had like literally just created a front end towards the end of second session. So today my focus would be on getting the front end up and running, kind of set it up properly. And once that is done, I think then I would like to focus on the Chrome extension part. Okay, at least getting it set up. So yeah, we have a lot of things to do in our 2 hours today. Let's see how much we are able to achieve. If not, I still have session 4, session 5, session 6. Okay. So yeah, don't worry about it. Even if we are not able to, of course, complete everything that I am aiming for today, we have other sessions to cover up for it. Okay. So yeah, let us get started. Let's continue. Let me hide this. Oh, there we go. There pops up my name. I'll make the screen a bit bigger. If I move away, that should help. Once again, if you're just joining, please do register for the session. I will share the link again in the chat. Okay, the link is in the chat. And once again, hi and hello. Cool. Let's move on. So, towards the can we further okay, there's a really good question. Can we further contribute to one stop Chrome extension? Yes, please do. Any pull request which would be valid, of course, I'm very happy to accommodate that. I'm pretty sure in one of the previous sessions, this one, uh, I think during the Oktoberfest, I started this project as part of GHW, and it received quite a lot of pull requests, which some of them are pending. A lot of them merged, definitely. Okay, so yeah, I'm open to contributions. Also, I would encourage you. Okay, this is an encouragement from my part that if you want to create your own version of this, contribute to your own version, build it, make it much better than what I will show you slash teach you slash help you figure out, and then put it on your portfolio. Go for it. You don't have to give any credits to me. Okay, so I'm also all for building it, putting it in your portfolio. You don't have, like, yeah, my licenses are permissive. I don't normally ask for any recognition for any of the things. So yeah, you can contribute to this one, or you can build your own and improve that one and put it wherever you want. Publish it, build it, make money out of it. Go for it. Okay. Cool. Front end. So as I said, today my focus would be a teeny tiny bit on front end. Before the end of the session, we had installed a few libraries, and we also had added them to app.jsx. So we are using Mantine, which is a UI library that I was very curious about, and always, like, I did not just basically find time to use it, but as a part of these sessions, I have now. So yeah, this is the one that I'll be using for this project. I am not fully aware of it, so whatever I will build, it might be a bit not exactly correct, but it works. Yeah, because Mantine version 7.1, 7.1, 7.17.1, 7.17.1, or whatever. So yeah, sorry. I was saying that I am not fully aware of all the things that they give because I have not dived too much deep into it. So whatever my knowledge is based on any searches that I do here. And like example for button, search for button, I see the examples and I use them. So it's quite possible that there may be better ways to do it. I will not be focusing too much onto it though today, or at least for these sessions. Once I find more time to work with Mantine, probably I'll have better knowledge. But all in all, definitely take a look at the component library. It's really interesting. It's really polished. Okay. Okay. Cool. So moving on. So towards the end of this session, we had created a container with some stuff. So I am going to open a terminal here, and I'm going to split my terminal into two. This would be my root, and I will need to focus on the front end and actually also on the back end. So I have three terminals right now open. Uh, okay, so the first one will be the root terminal, where we are outside of front end or back end folders. So I'm going to leave it as is. The second one is we will cd into the front end folder, so which is I am now inside the front end directory. And the third one, I'll cd into the backend folder. Okay, so now I want to run my backend. To run my backend, we were using, for the development purpose, we are using nodemon to keep our server up and running for any changes. So I'm going to basically run this script, npm run server. For the front end, I think the script is called dev, which is the development build gets up and running. So I'm going to do npm run dev and start that. So on localhost 5001 and port 5001, my server should be up and running. Let's go check it out. There we go. One stop backend running. And my front end is running on localhost 5173. So that should be my front end up and running. There we go. So yeah, I guess this is pretty good, pretty decent. Everything is still up and running, which is nice. Now let's move on and start writing code in the app.jsx. So main.jsx is the entry point to this project. We discussed in detail about this yesterday, where we talked about what does React give us, uh, what does this wheat give us. It scaffolds the project, and we saw what this script do, and yeah, a bunch of other things, right? So we kind of did all of that, so I'm not going to dive into it today. Definitely watch the part two, which is available, not will be, which is available on the YouTube channel of Major League Hacking. So not just my session, any other sessions that you want to join, which you missed out because maybe it was early or too late for you, you can always find all of them on the Major League Hacking YouTube channel. I will share the link in the chat for that. There we go. Okay, you can find all the previous streams that have happened on here. Okay, cool. So hello and badge. I am going to remove these two. And what am I going to do? Let me think. So from my app.tsx, which is the entry point, I also want, let me see, did I install React Router yesterday? Yes, I did. So we need to route to certain pages, uh, basically switch paths around. So actually, before that, let's start with the very basic. I'm going to create a folder, call it components. Inside this folder, I'm going to create a projects folder. Okay. Now all of this is happening inside front end. So I'll close my backend folder. Everything that we're doing is now happening inside front end. Inside the source folder, I have created the components folder. And inside the components, I have created the projects folder. Now inside the projects folder, I'm going to create a project list.jsx. Okay. So .jsx is an extension which is JavaScript but extended. Okay. So if you still write JavaScript, the only difference is it also allows us to write some HTML look like code, which is called JSX, and also allows us to write CSS on those JSX components, inline CSS if you want. So like styles. Yeah. Another folder that I'm going to create is going to be stores. So yesterday we talked about state management. We talked about Zustan. We also had a chat about uh, what does it mean by having global state, local state, and all those things. So Sorry, there's a question here. Should I update my system to Vite plus React JavaScript as I currently am using React JavaScript without? I am a bit confused about this. Well, what do you mean by update system to Vite plus React? Okay, so now in here in project list, I am going to create a function. So we'll call it const project list equals. It's an arrow function, and inside here I am going to use a return, and let's see the JSX syntax. So in here we'll call container from Mantine core, and in this we will have a title. We can align the title in center. We can and then give a title my projects. And to export this, we can export it either as a export const, or we can do a export default. So ideally, export default means that you are exporting just one. Okay, sorry, there's a question. There is no JSX file. It's showing me JavaScript file in my VS Code. Uh, so you'll have to create one if I'm correctly understanding that. And secondly, here on the bottom right, you can select a mode of document, and you can search for JSX, and that should give you JavaScript React configured language JSX, if that helps. Oh, you're using it without Vite, so then I would suggest that just scaffold the project. So to do that, you can actually go to Vite.js documentation and just scaffold a really new project if you are not using Vite yet. Or if you have copied over all my code, then you definitely would have this vite.config.js. So you could kind of use, like, once you copy over the project, all you need to do is run. Sorry, let me just snooze all my notifications. Yep, there we go. Yeah, once you copy over everything, all you need to do is run npm install, and then inside the front end folder. Also, once you've copied over the backend folder, then run npm install inside the backend folder. It will create node modules, and you should be able to get the project up and running. So everything should get set up automatically without you needing to do much changes. And then VS Code is kind of smart enough most of the times to actually recognize the folder types. So hopefully that helps. Okay, so I have created a title here. I'll also create a button. The button I am going to say, call it refresh projects. Okay. So these are the only two things. It is currently a very dumb component. It's not doing much. All it does is show a bunch of UI, uh, but that's fine. What we want to do is actually attach it to app.jsx. So in app.jsx, we will say that by default, show this project list. So it imports the project list from dot slash components slash projects slash project list. Okay. So from here, dot slash means go inside the folder components slash projects folder, and then slash project list. And as you may notice, that does not need the extension because it recognizes what is the extension type. We have added in app.jsx the project list file. Okay, we have kind of imported that file in here. So now if I go over to my front end, there should be my projects and refresh projects button. Okay. Now we can make this button full width if we want. So we can also change the variant. So variant, let's say I'm going for an outline variant and I want to make this full width button. So now if I go back, this is what it looks like. My projects, refresh projects. Now there's no space between the title and the button. So I can do a margin bottom here and say that uh, it is Excel. That should push everything down. Okay. So yeah, there's now a margin applied to my projects and it pushes down the content. So this is what we have ended up with. But it does not do much. It does not connect to our backend. It does not fetch any data. It's pretty dumb, I would say. So to connect to our backend and fetch data, what we want to do is create a project store where inside the store we will communicate with our backend, get all the project list. So what I'm talking about. So yesterday, if you remember, if we went over to slash API slash projects, we have two projects stored in our MongoDB database, right? So I want to fetch these two projects and show them on the UI here. When someone clicks on refresh project, or by default it should fetch it. So we want to do that. So yeah, let's write the UI for it. So to do it and to do it correctly from the get go and not come back and change it, what I'm going to do is I am going to basically create a store. So a very quick overview again on stores. So we talked about state management where you can do a local fetching of things. Okay. So you fetch this thing locally and you show it here. But sometimes we saw an example yesterday, like what if the child, example project list, wants to pass some data to app.jsx, which is the parent. Currently, project list is inside the app. So app can pass data to project list. Project list cannot pass data back to app, okay, in a conventional way. So that is where these store and these libraries come in, where you can kind of save the data at the topmost level and every other file or component, as we call it, can access that data. So yeah, let's create a store and I am going to call it use project store.js. I'm thinking what would be easier, directly to start from store, or should I start by actually showing a fetching of data and then porting it to a store? Give me 1 second. I'm still thinking. Uh, okay. Let me show you how would you normally fetch and how it changes for the store. Okay. Someone also said fetch. Okay. So I'll heed to that and let me show it. So let's say you want to fetch data in a React project without the need for store or anything else. I'm going to close all this. Let's say I want to fetch all the projects from this API, from this URL endpoint. So to do that, uh, Fetch is going to be asynchronous, and we need to fetch it outside, like after the component has loaded. So we can do a use effect, which is a React hook. Okay, a hook is kind of a special function. That's all you need to know for now. Now inside this, we can do a fetch. Now fetch is built in JavaScript. It is, you don't have to import it from anywhere. So inside the fetch, I will give it the URL. And now this, you remember async await yesterday? So similarly, we also talked about the dot then and dot catch method, which is very similar to async and await. So I'm going to use the dot then syntax here. So I'm going to say that fetch from this endpoint, and it is by default a get request. And once you do that, and once you get the response, so I'm going to store, once you get the response, going to store it in this variable. Then in that case, just return response.json. Okay, convert it to JSON and send back. And once that is done, once the response has been converted to JSON, then on the data that was received, I want to just console.log the data. Okay, so this is what I am doing. And I can also add a dot catch. Like if there is an error fetching, then in that case, console.log error and whatever is the error. So this is my fetch with a dot then dot catch. And I want to run this effect only one time. So I will pass it an empty array. In use effect, you could kind of tell it that how many times you want this particular thing to run. Do you want to run it on any variable change? Do you want it to run on any, what do you call, uh, only once? So then you give it an empty array. Or if you don't give it anything, then it runs, keeps on running. Okay, so now that I have done this, let's go over to one stop extension. I'm going to open the console and I'm going to refresh. Once I refresh, as you can see, there is the data. Good, got it? So we have used fetch to successfully get the data. Now I can store this data somewhere. So I'm going to create a local variable. So I am, and that will hold my data, that will hold the state. So the state is nothing but changing data. Okay, so let's say I'm going to call it const projects data, comma set projects data. And again, I'm going to use something that React gives. It is called use state hook. And initially, this would be empty. Okay, there is no data. So projects data is initially empty. Set projects data is like a special function which allows you to set the data. Like, yeah. So now in here, where I'm doing a console log, instead of just doing a console log, I'm going to also do a set data. So I'm going to put a semicolon here. Then I'm going to call my set projects data and set it to the data variable that was returned. Okay, this data variable is now goes in here. So where is this available? The set projects data will update this variable projects data. So once that is updated, I can actually show it here. So I can uh, try and just do a p tag, and inside this I will show the project data. Okay, this is very simple what I'm doing. So now if I go in here and do a refresh, something occurs. It says that objects are not valid as React child. Found object with keys, ID, this. Use an array instead. So I'm trying to show an array of objects, and React goes like, can't really render that like just like that. So what you need to do is you need to loop over it or map over it. Uh, let's do that. Let's loop over the data so that we can show each part of the data. So I'm going to say like projects data if this exists and projects data dot map. So this part basically says that project data exists. It's not empty. And if that exists, then map over that. And then for each project data, what we want to do is p tag inside this. I am like, what does my each project data have? It might have a bunch of things. Let's say I only want to show the name. So each project data dot name. And okay, let's say also I want to show uh, ID underscore ID. Okay, so dot underscore ID, and I'm getting another error. It's saying that you cannot have two independent things. They need to have one parent element. So I'm going to wrap it in a div tag. Okay, so ID and name. ID first, then name second. Now if I go back here, oh, oh, does Manti not allow all of this? Uh, title and title, title. Oh, this is interesting. What am I doing wrong here? I got the button, I got the project, and I got the data. Interesting. That is weird. I'm also doing the set projects data, and there is the projects data. The data definitely exists, which is very weird. Okay, I can do it the hard way. Oh, okay, I think I got it. This needs to be this, and this needs to be this. Yeah, there we go. Oof, I forgot the return word. Yeah, so if you use curly brackets here, then you need to use the return keyword. Okay, and now I can change this to div again, and this to a p tag again, and this to a p tag again. Pretty silly mistake there. Okay, so yeah, if you're using a curly brackets, don't forget to use a return keyword. Uh, and if you're not using curly brackets and it's a round bracket, then you don't really need the return keyword because that is an implicit return. So there we go. There we got the ID, the name, ID, name. So this is what you would do to normally fetch the data. But now the fetching is happening inside the project list, right? But if I create another component, let's say I create a project card dot .jsx, and I want to get the data, this fetch data in project card. How can I get it? That's a question. So how can I get the data from project list into project card? Project card either needs to be inside the project list. That is one thing. So if I call the project card here, let me quickly do something. Okay. So in here, I will need to call the project card, and with data, like it needs a prop. So this is called as a prop. And in here, I can pass it the each project data, right? So that's what I can do. I can take this thing, remove it from here, and pass it in place of this return. And now inside the project card, I can say data dot underscore ID, and similarly data dot underscore, not underscore, data dot name. Okay. Now if I go back here, there we go. So it works the same. I am fetching the data in project list and I'm passing it to project card. But what if it was the other way around? What if the project card was the parent, but the fetching was happening inside the project list? How would we do that? So that is where the idea of global store comes in, uh, which is either we pass it as a prop, but then if another level, so like not even project card needs it, there is another component which actually needs to show this data, like simple project card. Okay, so project card has internally simple project card. Now your data will pass two levels down. So now this is called as prop drilling. You're passing the data down and down and down and down, and only the last component needs it. It's fetched at the topmost level, but it's needed by the bottommost component, and you have to pass it. You're passing it through so many layers. It's something that React warns you against because that will have a huge impact on the performance of your web page. So if it's one component, yes, it's fine. It's two levels. Two levels is also fine. I would say if you start nesting down three levels and below, then prop drilling is a very bad idea. It impacts the performance of your web page. So you don't want that. So prop drilling is out of question. Local state is out of question. Also, a child cannot pass the data back to parent in conventional ways. So that's where the idea of stores come in. So a store is, as I said, you're saving the data at a global level. Okay, and once you have saved the data at a global level, any other component can use it. There's one more thing that I wanted to show. If you remember, we have actually added this library called as Axios, which allows us to do the exact same thing as fetch. So let me also show you that. Axios.get. Axios would be imported. Okay. So this should exactly do the exact same thing. Let's see. Rest.json is not a function in Axios. Okay. So there's the data, and the data exists on the dot data. Then in this case, console.log data will need to be done. And in here, I'll have to do data, and there we go. So there we have it. So now we have used Axios to fetch the data. So instead of using the fetch, which is a built-in way of fetching data, we can also use this library called as Axios. And on that, the data exists inside another data. Okay? So if you see here, if I only console log the data part, so data, so Axios returns a bunch of these things. It returns a dot request, it returns a header, it returns a config, but our data is stored inside this variable, inside this key called as data. Okay, so that's why I am doing data dot data. This data is this variable, and this dot data is this one. Okay, this key in Axios. Okay, so that's how we'll use Axios to fetch the data. Now I am going to get rid of all of this for the time being, and we end up with our simple web page. And now let's move on and go to our use project store to actually store the data at the global level. So we are using Zustan. So now this is more of a syntax thing. So in Zustan, to create a store, you import create from Zustan. Then we'll also import Axios from Axios library that we have installed. Now I can create a const API underscore URL variable, and this would be my project API URL, right? To fetch all the projects, to get all the projects. So I can hard code it like this. Now we'll create a function. Okay. Uh, and we'll follow the same syntax. So this would be not a function, this would be a hook. And a hook needs to follow a syntax. It needs to start with the word use. So use project store. It will be called. And we'll use the create that we have imported. And now inside the create, we have to call this set. Now in here, what we could do is we could define a initial thing. So if you remember uh, that in our project list, actually let me keep everything. Yes, this is what we did. And let's see. So in our project list, what we did was we defined a initial state as empty array. We can do the same thing in the store. We can say that projects. So projects data is basically our projects. Also, let me kind of name it same then. It makes it much more easy than to understand. Okay. So projects, this is our projects, which is what we are showing to the user right now. Everything works. So projects is here, and we can say that initially it is empty. So this is my initial state. Then when we do this whole fetching part, right? When we do this whole fetching part, we can do that here in the store. We can do fetch projects, and this would be asynchronous. Why? Because, well, it can take time to fetch the data. And now we can say const response equals to await axios dot get. So this axios dot get, and we get it from where? Here we had passed this endpoint, which I'm storing currently in API URL. So I can just do a dot get, and inside that we can pass the API URL. And once you have got the data, then set it. Set it on which variable? So our set projects was setting the data on this projects variable. So that's the exact same thing that we are going to do here. We are going to say projects response dot data. Why dot data? Because if you see, we had to do data dot data, right? So you understand how to create a store now. So this is your local store, your local state, sorry. And now we kind of transformed our knowledge of creating a store from a local to a global store. And as you can see, it's not that difficult. That's what Zustan gives us. It gives us this uh, very simple syntax that if you understand how you do it in use state, then you can definitely create a store out of Zustan. And that's it. Fetching the data is kind of done. Okay. So now let's use it very quickly. So I can get rid of all of this. So I'm going to comment it out for the time being. And now I'm going to say const. Uh, we can kind of extract two things here. And also, oh, I had forgotten uh, to export this use project store, right? So I have to do export default use project store. So now that it is exported, it can be imported here. So I'm going to do use project store. So this one has two things to give us. It has the projects to give us. It can, like, it's exporting this projects variable. It's also exporting this fetch projects variable. So I am going to call projects here and fetch projects. Okay. So we have got the projects, we have got the fetch projects, and we are calling the use project store, which is this store hook that we have sent. And now we can call the use effect and say inside the use effect, we can say that this fetch projects, which is a function, call that function. Okay. And anytime like fetch project changes, like for the time being, let's only run it once for the very first time. Okay. So now that should give us exactly the same thing. Okay, nothing changes. So we have replaced the fetching and storing in use state to this very simple syntax. Don't need to use the Axios here because it's happening inside the project store. Don't need use state here, but you might be getting a warning saying that React hook use effect has a missing dependency, either included or removed from the dependency array. What it is saying is that what if you add a new project in here, then fetch project needs to run again and fetch the latest data. So we can say that anytime fetch project changes, fetch the latest data. So that is what in this dependency array means. It is dependent on the changing variable fetch projects. We have done the exact same thing, as in, like, whatever we had, that big chunk of code kind of boils down to this very small piece of code where everything else is happening inside my store. And now this data, this fetch projects data is available everywhere. Example, if I go to app.jsx and I call this use project store, and I can just do a console.log here and say that app.jsx, and in here let me console log the projects data. I am not using, okay, let's ignore that. As you can see, app.jsx, even though we are not exactly using the fetch projects part of it, it still has the data. Initially it loads empty because that's the initial data. Then the component, the second part here, which is the project list, loads. It calls the store. Inside the store, fetching happens. Once the fetching has happened, it sets this fetch projects. It sets this projects to whatever is the response, and then anywhere anyone can access that data. And app.jsx, which didn't even call the fetching, can has access to the data. Do you understand the power of store here? Does it make sense now? What we are doing with store? And yes, context does the exact same thing as just and store. I find just and to be simpler to understand compared, because as you saw, the syntax was pretty portable. We did what we did in usestate, ported it to just and. Uh, yeah, in a very big, in a bigger project, you should go for store management with Sustan. In a project which is way, way, way massive, I would suggest Redux. Okay, sorry. So yeah, that's the power of store. And now, basically, what, remember my initial argument that a child cannot pass the data back to parent, but now parent has access to that data. It's kind of the child has passed it in a way. So I think that's enough fanboying over Zustand for the time being. Uh, Pretty cool, pretty slick. and we can add a few more things in our store. So we have added fetching the data. At one point, like, we'll want to create, right? Create data. You remember the post method? This is our create project, basically. Uh, so we want to do that in Zustand as well. So we create a hook, sorry, create a variable for that. So create project, async projects, and arrow function. And inside this, we will say const response equals to await axios dot post. So once you get the data, we'll try to post the data to which endpoint? The API URL that we have created. With what? With the project data. I should not call it projects because we'll create one project at a time. So following the basic conventions of English language here, single project. Okay. So what have we done? Whatever we were doing here is exactly what I am doing there. We were doing a post request. So I'm using Axios to do a post request. And then in the body, we had to pass some data like the name, description tags, and whatever else you want. That is what is being passed from, like, whenever someone calls this create project. The way we call fetch projects, we can also call create project here. And then add some data, pass that data. Once that data is passed, what will happen is it will come to the store, and then we'll try to send a post request to this endpoint with the project data, like which with whatever data. And once that data is like, and once that is successful, we want to update our projects, right? So successful means that we now have three things inside this array, okay, instead of just two. So we want to update that. So we can do that very simply in Zustan by saying set, okay, and inside set we'll create a variable state, and we will say that the projects variable, okay, which was whatever before, add the response, whatever response you get, response dot data to projects, but also whatever existed before, keep that as well. Okay. So does this make sense? So we are using a spread operator. A spread operator basically means that whatever existed before, keep it as is, and add this new data which we have received after creating a project. Okay, sorry. Uh, so that is our create project. So we are sending a post request on this endpoint. Once we have received the response, then response.data is basically where our new data will be. And we are updating this projects variable that we have, but also telling it that keep the existing data, just add this new one. Okay. Uh, then what else did we have? We had this update project, the put request, if you remember, right? Uh, hopscotch. And this put request where we could actually update a project by an ID. So we can do the same thing. We can write some function for it in the store as well. So update project. Again, it would be asynchronous. But now instead of taking just the project, it will take in two things. It will take in the ID that you want to update, and it will also need the updated data, right? So it will now take in two things. It will take in the ID because that is needed to be passed. like which project do you want to update. So you need to give it an ID. And what do you want to update? That is the thing in the body. Okay. So this is what I want to update. So updated data will need to be passed. And now I will say const response equals await axios dot put request. Okay, we are going to do a put request. Now the put request, uh, this part is already stored in our API URL, but then it needs the extra slash and then whatever is the ID that was passed, right? So let's do that. So to do that, I'm going to use backticks here, dollar sign curly brackets, so that I'll call the variable here and do a slash and then again a dollar sign, curly brackets, and inside this the second variable. So this will get resolved to http colon slash slash localhost colon 5001 slash API slash projects slash ID, whatever is the ID, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, okay, something like that. So this is the new URL that we are going to send a put request, and we will pass it the updated data. Once you have received the updated data, then we of course want to do the whole set thing again, right? We'll say state, and inside this we will say that the projects, okay, the variable projects, it will, what we'll now need to do is we'll need to map over the data that we already have existing and then find the ID which was updated and update only that data, right? So if we have like three data, uh, or let's say two data, I only want to update the data of this ID. Then in our projects array that we have existing, I'll map over every object, find the matching ID, this underscore ID. It should match with the ID that was given here, and then update that part of the data, right? So projects is going to be state dot projects dot map, and for each project basically we are saying if project dot underscore id, so underscore id is basically the response id, is triple equal to the id that was passed in here. If this is the case, then in that case update that data to the response dot data. Okay, whatever you get back from response, update it to that, else leave it to whatever was existing. So leave it as proj, which was this variable that I created. Also, if you have a question that what is the state dot projects and what is this projects, this projects is this project variable that we have created, and state dot projects is basically, you can think of it as a small copy. Okay, so state contains every variable that we create here. Okay, so it's an object. Okay, so state object, inside that every variable that we create exists. So you can visualize visualize it that way. Okay, so update project is done, and finally delete project. So to delete a project, we need the ID that we want to delete. And now remember that there was no response on delete. We were just sending a message. A simple message was responded. There is no body that it takes. It only needs the ID of what you want to delete. And then we were sending back a response like deleted this project with ID successfully. Don't really need. In our store, what we want to do is then update and remove that particular object from our array. So we can now send a delete request. So now the URL will be exactly like this. The API URL slash what ID you want to delete. Once that is successful, okay. So in we will do set state And in here, we will say that the projects variable is now going to change. And what will happen is in state dot projects dot filter out, okay, filter out the project data where proj dot underscore id is not equal to id. Okay, so what we are saying is that if the id matches, we don't want it in our in our updated array. Wherever the id does not match, only keep those, and wherever the id matches, well, that was deleted, so we don't really need to keep that. And that's it, that is our store. Okay, the use project store is done. Now similarly, we can create other stores. We can create a use link store. We can create a use qa store, right? So yeah, that is what I would want you to do in, yeah, on your own. Okay, so I want you to create a use link store and use qa store on your own, following the same structure. So there won't be much difference, because if you remember, our api was also like really similarly structured. So instead of projects, you can call it links, and in the use qa store, instead of project, it will be called as questions, right? So we can have links here. Instead of fetch projects, it would be fetch links. Uh, the API URL will change. It will be slash API slash links. Uh, so this variable has been called links. So everything else will remain the same. Create project will be called create link, update link, delete link, and changes accordingly. For QA, you can have questions. You can have fetch questions, create questions, update question, delete question, right? So that's our use qa store. So that is, I would say, kind of a homework for you, that try and create all of those. Now let me uh, go back to our project. Let me zoom in again. So now that we have the data and we have the project list, now let's make it kind of pretty, right? So we have fetched the projects, we have done the fetching of the project, we have also done fetching of uh, so we have projects and fetch projects, and it is stored in the store. We got the use effect done, and now yeah, we can do this. We can say that if projects dot length, if that is equal to zero, triple equal to zero, what we are saying is that if there are no projects, it's an empty array. In that case, what I want to do is show a loader. So loader comes from Mantine again, thanks to Mantine, and you can have a variant defined. So there are like multiple variants. Uh, let's see, loader. Let me go over to Mantine docs, search for loader. There we go. So there is loader with just color blue, size uh, default. Oh, not variant, type. Okay. So we can have a type defined like dots. So let me call it type. Type equals to dots. Default color is blue, so I'm going to leave it at that. So if the project length is zero, which means that none of the projects have not been fetched yet, in that case, uh, show a loader of dots, or we can go for oval. Yeah. Else, what I want to do is, what do I want to do? Else. So there must be a grid. Yes. So there's this grid thing that we can do. Create a grid of sorts, which could be kind of flexible. Yeah. So I'll create a grid, again coming from Mantine, and you can add a spacing using gutter. Okay. So the gutter is basically the spacing between two parts of the grid, like two grids that we have. Uh, we can define that. I'm going to leave it as is. Else, inside the grid, now inside the grid, we can do this grid call. Okay, grid call. And do you see the difference the gutter makes here? So actually, let me add a gutter of uh, MD size. Okay, and now inside this, you remember the whole mapping that we had done? We'll do it again. So projects dot map. So at this point, I'm sure that the projects exist, because if it did not exist, then it would be stuck on the loader part. But now we have moved one level down, which means that the projects exist. So then we can say that projects.map on each project. I say each project, but I write the word project because I think it's conventional that way. And in here, we will do a grid.call. And if you remember, there was a warning on React page saying that you need to provide a key. So key is React's way of keeping a track of the data inside the array. Okay. So in our array, we have multiple objects. React goes like, give me a unique thing in that object so that I can remember. If I remember it, then next time onward, what will happen is, if let's say for only the second object changes when we do a put example, okay, and only this project one is changed, then React will not re-render this. It will remember that, oh, I was keeping a track of IDs. I know that this ID has some data changed. This ID did not have any data change. So I'm not going to re-render that part. I'm only going to re-render this part. So this is how so you can imagine it this way. Okay, you can think of it this way. So IDs are keys, sorry, are React's way of keeping a track of what changed and only re-render things that has changed. That's how you make React performant. Grid column this. And let's also use this project card that we have created. The project card. I'm going to rename the variable to project and we'll pass it the project. So most of these variables are in use. So that is fine. And now let's go over to project card. So first of all, as I said, I'm going to rename this variable to be called as project. Hmm. Okay. So now this variable, I'm going to call it project. And now in the return, let's use some Mantine magic. So card is something that we can use from Mantine, just a card. So this is how cards can look in Mantine. A lot of ways of showing. There's a width border, shadow, radius. You can do all of that. So I'm going to say yes. It needs to have a shadow. Uh, Shadow of, let's say, Excel. Okay, like biggest shadow ever. You can add a padding. Okay. So there we go. A padding, a radius. So I'm going to actually exactly copy this one. So that's our card with padding and border. Now I am going to add a title here. And inside this title, I am going to show the project dot name. Okay. So let's see how does this look for the time being. So if I go over to one stop extension, do a reload, title is not defined. Oh, because I did not import it from Mantine. Okay, so this is how it looks. One stop extension, project one. Title is the biggest size. We can kind of control the size. So if I go over to Mantine again, search for title, and in title you can create a order thing. So I'm going to go for order 6, which will make it a H6. So now it's kind of smaller. It's still visible. Let's say order 4. I think that would be, yeah, better looking. I feel. So there's the title done. Then the next one would be text coming from Mantine Core again. And inside here, uh, we will give the project dot description. Okay. So now let me reload. Uh, no description. I think we are missing description. Yes, both our data is missing description. So if we don't have description, then we can give a default no description provided. Okay. So now what React would do, or like our JavaScript would do actually, it will try to get this variable, like this particular key in our object. If that does not exist, it will render this second part, no description provided. Uh, I'd need to change the color and stuff. So first of all, I want to change the size to be small, and the color, I want that to be gray. What other colors are there? If I go for dark, okay, perfect. Yeah, that's too dark. I think gray is fine. Okay, cool. Going to leave it at that. Uh, Also, I should do some push pull here and there, right? So I want to have some spacing between this and that. So let me do a empty, that is margin top, and I want that to be MD. Oh, this is the my projects. Okay, my bad, not here. Uh, Need to do it here. Yes, there we go. So some spacing between this button and the cards that get rendered. Uh, Too much spacing between the title, so I am going to reduce that to MD as well. So margin bottom, yes. So this is how our UI currently looks. It is fetching the data from our API. My projects, refresh projects, one stop extension, this no description provided. Cool, let's go ahead. Now in our project data, what else? What if we have tags in our project data, then we want to show that as well, right? So let me do project.tags. So if project.tags exist, and and the length, it's not an empty array. So project.tags.length is greater than 0. Then in that case, what I want to do is in here we'll call group from Mantine core. Uh, Margin top, let's give it like MD. Spacing around them. Actually, no, not spacing. Group this, and then let's map over the map is basically looping. Okay, so if you are hearing the word map for the first time, it is basically a way of looping. The only difference is that when you map, you create a copy of the data. Okay, so tag, and in here we will do a badge from Mantine core again, where the key would actually be the tag, because our tags are going to be unique. A variant equals to, let's say, a gradient. Okay, there is an option of gradient, and you can do a gradient where you can define the from which color gradient. So I'm going from orange to uh, red, and you can define a degree. Like let's say I go for 90 degrees in here. So badge, and inside here we will want to render the tag. Okay. So now this is what it will look like. Chrome extension, Express Server, React, GHW, MLH, web test. Now, it is quite possible, and I don't think we have any sort of protection around duplicate tags. Okay, and if there is a duplicate tag, then React will complain. They'll be like, React will be like, you promised that tag will be unique, but it's not. So there's another alternative. You can create in map. You can have the variable and the index. So the key can be the index. So index is nothing but the position, right? In the array, position in the array is index. So you can do this as well. You can have position in the array as an index. It's normally a bad idea. So React says that don't do that because, well, position in the array can change even though the data does not change. So it's a bad idea, but I leave it here for you to understand or like know that there is also this alternative. And then finally, I want to have a button and call it view details. Okay. So this button in here, view details. On click of this, it should take me to a new page. So let me add some stuff here. First of all, let's color it. I want the variant to be light, the button component to behave as an A tag. Okay, and then pass it a href. And in the href, we will say that it needs to go to slash whatever is the project dot underscore id and slash info. This is where it needs to go. So variant light and this. And now if I click on this thing, the URL, if you see, changes. It changes to slash some ID, which is the ID that is coming from here. Okay. So 4AD1, B4AD1. This is this one. And this one is 100D5. So if I go to this one, the URL changes. So we want to switch the pages, but there's nothing that changes because we have not set up routing yet. Also, for the position, can I give it? Interesting. I would have thought this would work. So in group, let me see. Uh, I want the, yeah. Oh, justify. Okay, cool. Not position. It's justify. Yeah, there we go. So this is what our card looks like. Okay, so we are getting the data, the details. We are also switching the pages. So this is the main page, and you saw for a brief second there was that loader that comes in. Okay, when we try to fetch the data, a quick loader that is shown. Cool. So I think that is everything. We can also wrap that loader in. I think I don't know if this has a position. Justify. Nope. We can wrap it in a group as well. I don't want it. I want it to be in center. Justify center. Yes. I can do this. so that the loader is in the center. Okay, so now if I do a quick, oh, group is not defined because it did not import it. 19.4. So now there is a loader that comes in here. Okay, if there's too much data, you will see the loader for a longer time, but this is fine. So we have got our card, we have got this. What is missing is when we route over to the new page, we want to switch the page. Currently, it changes the URL, but still stays on the same page. So that's bad. So to do that, we'll have to set up routing, right? So let's go back to our app.jsx. But before that, let me actually push all of this so that you have access to this code. Added a project list and store. Added card and store session 3. This is session 3. Added project data. Yeah, this makes much more sense. And let me do a git push. So now you should have everything for session 3 right here. Everything that we have done. So let me share this link again in the chat. There we go. So now you should have the everything up and running exactly what I have. Now let's go and set up routing. That is page switching. That is not happening right now. So for that, we'll need to go over to app.jsx. And in here, we'll have to start from main.jsx. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to wrap this whole thing in a browser router. The browser router, it comes from uh, a React router. So we have installed React router in package.json. There is React router. So React router used to be called as React Router DOM before, but now it is called React router. Version 7 is what we have. And to learn about browser router, okay, apparently this search is not that good. So installation, and here we go. So we have to import browser router, wrap our app with that browser router, and then we can do the routing using this routes, wrap our route into routes, and that's it. Okay, very simple. So we can do everything either on app.jsx, but just for the sake of simplicity and keeping it separate, I'm going to do it here. I'm going to wrap our app in this. Uh, strict mode can actually be the parent to everything. Okay? Strict mode will be the parent to everything, and then browser router, and then so browser router, it's helpful because React is a single page application. There's no concept of routing. So what you want to do is staying on the same page. We want to load a different JavaScript. Okay, and let the user get a feel that, oh, I have switched pages. So that is what the router helps us. Okay, so the whole app is kind of wrapped around that. So we have done this change. I'm going to leave it here. And now in here in app.jsx, what we want to change is we want to add routes. Routes come from React router. It's imported here. So I'm going to wrap my project list with routes. But then if you see their documentation, it says that you have to wrap everything in routes and then you have to define a route, a single route path. Okay. So let's do that. So I'm going to say a route, which is again gets imported from React Router, and we give it a path. So we'll say that on if the user is on the home page, then we want to render the element project list. And if oops, and if the user switches pages, so if the user goes to this page called as path equals to slash, then we had the project id, right? So if you go over to project card, the href says slash project id. So if you remember in our backend, we had done this. We used to this do this as using colon id. So here I'm going to call it project id for reference, slash info. If the user goes here, then I want to render, uh, for the time being, I want to render a div saying hello. Okay. And we can also go for a wildcard. Now, wildcard needs to be the last thing in the route. Okay. So why? Because if wildcard will match if any of these fails. Okay. So we'll say route path this and element equals to, uh, we can say a div tag with not found. Okay. So now if I go over to my project, I click on view details, it shows me hello. But if I go to slash, uh, blah blah something, it will return not found because it tried to match this route and it was like, oh, I don't have a definition for this. So let me return whatever the user has told me. Okay. So that is the power of this star. It means anything after you are done matching all the above routes and you have not found any matching thing, then return this thing. Okay. So now we have kind of done routing. So view details goes to this page, the slash info, and it returns hello. View details goes to this page, returns hello. So it's returning hello both the times. We have figured out the routing part, but we have not figured out what to render. So let's do that. So to do that, I am going to, uh, create a project info. So inside components, I'm going to create a new folder called as project info. Inside project info, I'm going to create a new file called as project info.jsx. Let me close everything else. You have seen, hopefully you saw everything that I did. We wrapped our whole application in browser router, which is something that React router gives. Browser router is, our way of helping user navigate, but it's still a single page application. So we are navigating to different parts of our JavaScript. Okay. And now in the app, we followed the documentation. We did the route, and we rendered elements. Uh, we don't have any component created for this one, so we just rendered a hello. Uh, and for this one, if none of the above routes match, and the user is trying to go somewhere where it does not match, in that case, we'll return a not found. Okay. So this is done, and now coming back to project info. So now in the project info, let's write some code for project info. How much time? I have half an hour left. Should be able to complete this part. And then you have to do the homework. The homework, you don't have to do it. I will, of course, make the changes and push it. But for your learning purpose, I would definitely recommend that please, please, please try and do creation of use link store and use QA store on your own. This is for your own benefit, for your own learning benefit. It's okay if you don't want to, or you're confused about something and you're not able to figure it out. You can always go to my GitHub. I'll push the solution at the end of the lesson. Okay. Sorry. So now const, and now I am going to get the project ID equals to use params. So now use params, it comes from, okay, it does not show it here, but it comes from this one, from React router. So we'll go import use params from React router. Okay. So const project info equals to this. And so what will this give me? Use params. We remember doing it in the backend, right? So in backend, in our routes, in our project route, we did this request.params.id. So that is very similar to what use params does. It checks the URL and then it finds this whole slash and whatever is the project ID. And this project ID is because we have given it the name project ID here. Okay. We're trying to kind of take that. And then we'll get another thing from React router, which is use navigate. Okay. So use navigate is to navigate to a function. So example returns a function that lets you navigate programmatically in the browser in response to user interaction or effects. So example, if user clicks on a button and you want to navigate to a new page, you can use this use navigate. Now I'm going to create something here which we have not created, which is what your homework is kind of. Use link store. Okay. This needs to be imported and this will return us links and fetch links. Okay. Similarly, we'll also have questions and fetch questions that will come from use QA store. So these are the two things that are not created yet, but hopefully you'll create it and then this will work. Right now it will not work. Use effect. Inside this, we will do a fetch links. For now, fetching the link requires a project ID. Which project ID do you want to fetch it for? So that is why. So that's how we will. Right now, it only renders a single hello. Okay, because it goes to this URL, it goes to slash this, but then it's like, what do I render? How do I render different things for different ID? That is where this line will help us. We'll fetch the links only for the project ID that is here. And similarly, we'll fetch the questions only for the project ID that is in the URL. So then we'll have a unique page. Depending on this project ID, this content will change. And the dependencies in this case are going to be, it depends on three things. It will depend if the project ID changes, then we need to refetch the data. If the fetch links changes or the fetch questions changes. Okay, cool. So this is done and now we'll do a return here, and in the return we will do container which comes from Mantine, and in here we'll have a group again which comes from Mantine. In here we'll have a title. The title can be called like project resources, and a button that will again come from Mantine. And now this is where like we need a back button when we switch the page. Now imagine from a extension point of view, extensions are pretty small, like small, and how does a user do a back? Right now in the browser, I can do a back by removing this part and I go back, or there is also this button to go back, but that will not exist in case of extension. So that is why we need to create a back button. So on click of that, the user goes to home page. So that is why we actually got this navigate. So on click of this button, we want the user to navigate to the home page. So slash, and we can call it back to projects. Cool. Uh, what next? There's also a divider that exists in Mantle. Pretty slick, I would say. It's nice looking. So we can have a divider like this. Divider MYMD. You can have a dotted variant as well and a dashed variant as well. And you can also have a label in the center. So divider with a label in the center. I'm going to use this one. So divider, the label will be called as links, and then you have to give it a label position in center, and we can add a spacing using my. Okay, so I'm going to give it a medium spacing, actually not small, md, and that's our divider. Okay, so it will add a very nice divider, and we will now we can show a loader again. We can do like links dot length. If that is equal to 0, that means there are no links. Then in that case, we can show a loader which comes from Manteen. It has a type uh, going for dots this time, else. Okay, so the colon means else. So question mark is basically the if. So if it is 0, then do this, else do. We need to have a grid here. The gutter can be MD, and we can do a mapping over this. So we can do a links dot map. For each link, what we want to do is do a grid dot call. So now you see that it is kind of coming very similar to the project card thing and project list thing. Sorry. Okay. So remember my, I think day one, day two, I've said that once you get the pattern, then the pattern kind of repeats everywhere. Okay. So key equals to project ID. Here the key would be equal to the link dot underscore ID. And in here, the way we did a project card, we will do a link card, and link equals to link. Okay, so that's our link done. Then we can, there's also a space thing that exists, but we can actually add a divider again. And now this divider will be Q and A. And we can kind of copy this whole thing again. And now instead of links dot length, we will say questions, questions. Yes, links, questions dot length triple equals to 0. If that is the case, in that case, show a loader with type dots, else grid. And now instead of mapping over links, we'll map over questions dot map, and this and grid column. This is fine. And instead of calling this link, I'll call it QA. So QA dot ID, and this would be QA, and here it would be QA. And instead of link card, what we want here is a QA card. Okay, so these are another two components that we'll have to create. uh, I can create it right here. We'll have a link card dot JSX, and we'll also have a QA card dot JSX. QA card takes in QA, and link card will take in link, and it will show link here. QA will show QA here. Okay. So these two imports should be sorted. The only thing that is not is this use links. Also, I'm not doing a export default. So I'm going to do export default project info, which is this file name. And now if I go over to my app.jsx, in here where we were rendering a hello, instead of rendering a hello, we'll now render a project info. Okay. So that is rendering of our project info, which currently has these two errors because, well, these two don't exist technically. We still have to create it. Now, if I go here, there should be an error on the second page. So if I go, yes, use link store is not defined. Okay. So this is more like a to do for now. Create use link store, comma, use QA store. If I do this, I get rid of the use effect and I just do const links equals to empty array just to show you how the UI looks like, and const questions equals to empty array, and also do a console.log of the project ID. Okay, so now this is what it will look like, the UI. You see those three dots? It's trying to fetch the data. The project ID has loaded, okay, and it is the correct ID. Project resources back to project. Project 1, it will have a different ID, D100D5. This is the links, this is the Q&A, and in here will be the card. Okay, so oh, I have like 20 minutes left. Actually, I can technically create everything, but you get an idea of how the UI will look like. We have this, we have the back button, we have this. Uh, Project resources, it's too big. What did we do for my projects? Let's go over to my projects, which was in project list, and the title was this one. So I'm going to copy this title, go over to project info, do that, and call it project resources. Can't align it center. Uh, you could do a size, right? No, I think there was order to it, and I'm going to say the order is going to be 4. Yeah, a small one. Similarly, change the size of the button as well, and maybe the variant. Don't know. Can I do a size here? Yep, looks like it. I want to make it compact MD. Okay, this is what it looks like, and nothing is aligned. So I want to do a justify, and that should give me center. Oh, not justify center. I think then I have to do align. Okay, I'll have to check that out. So that both of them are kind of center aligned. Uh, it's not justify align item center. That should be align items top. Okay, that kind of looks decent to me. So project resources, back to project, and compact makes it look bigger to me. Excess, compact excess. Yeah, cool. And now if I do align items center, project resources is the problem. Going for SM and cool. So this is what we end up with for now. I still have like 20 minutes. So actually, I can technically create everything. A few details, back to project, project resources. Yep, cool. Now let's get the links and everything sorted. I would still say that try and create it on your own. Okay, both the or actually, I'll only create one of them. Use linked store.js. Okay, let me only create the use link store.js. So use link store.js. I am going to also keep the use project store as reference. Let me close everything else. So step one, we can actually import create later. I will start with directly const use link store equals to create. Create comes from Zustand. Then in this, it will take this whole callback of set. And then in here, what I want to do is have a links, which will be an empty array initially by default. And we can have a fetch links, which wouldn't be nothing but asynchronously fetching the data. Const response equals to await axios dot get, and it needs the API underscore URL, which we'll need to create. So now API URL would be const API URL. Now this one is interesting. Why? Because it is nearly the same. I'm going to copy this part, but for getting the links, it is slash API slash links, right? So once we get the data, then we know we have to do this whole set thing. Okay. So, and finally, we can do a export default use link store. So now in my project info, where I have removed this, now I'll say create only use QA store and complete use link store. Okay. So links and fetch links, they come from use link store. We'll need to import use link store. Don't need this links because, well, it will now come from here. I need this use effect. The only difference will be the fetch questions will not be there. So fetch questions needs to be removed from here. And yeah, that's it. So now if I go and reload, there is an error. Oh yeah, our link card. Okay, so I'll have to also improve our link card. So let me do that as well. Once I do this one, it should be pretty easy. It's literally a copy paste for use QA card with shadow. Oh, need to import card. Card needs to be imported from Mantine. So shadow equals to SM. We can have a padding of large, a radius of MD, and width border. Now, does it remind you of something? Like one of the cards that we have created? So, pretty sure we created something very similar. Let me just keep this one. And okay, I can actually copy this whole thing, paste it here. The only difference would be instead of project, now things need to be called link. So link dot name. But actually, if you remember from our backend and our model and link, I'll also keep this one open actually here. So there, so project card actually I've copied. So I'll keep that smaller. So if you remember, our link did not have a name; it had title attribute. So instead of link dot name, this will be link dot title. And the second one was this project dot description. We didn't have a description, but we had notes. We can have a link dot notes here. Okay. Uh, we also had this URL, which project does not have it. So we'll have to create something for this. So we can do that. We can create something very quickly here. We can say link dot URL. Like if this exists, then in that case, just show it. Okay, show it in a text. Uh, and inside this text, I want a tag. Okay, a proper a tag with href. The href would actually be the link dot URL. It should open in a new tab. So that is why I'll do target blank underscore blank. Target equals to underscore blank. And now inside this, I'll do a link dot URL. Okay. Now this text, we can kind of give it a size if we want. It had a size, right? Yeah. And we can give it a color. So color is equal to, oh, because it has not imported text, that's why it's not giving suggestions. So color is equal to, let's go with line. Okay. So URL will always be this color. Now project.tags, instead of project.tags, it should be as link.tags, right? Link.tags and then link.tags.length greater than 0. Then in that case, link.tags.map over that. And last thing would be the date. Okay. There's no button to view details here. Okay. This is the detailed page. So last one is going to be a date. We can show the date. I'm going to go for color gray or even dark actually. I think there's a dark. Yes. And in here we can show the date. So date was this created at property. So new date link will have a dot created at, and then we'll try to convert it to locale date string. So this is my link card. So now if I go in here, title is not defined. Did I not import title? Yep, it did not. Okay, group is not defined. Okay, badge will also be not defined. So okay, now I should have everything. Perfect, there we go. So this is our links. Example domain, no description provided. uh, I could be actually smart here, and I can say that if there is a link dot notes and then show this thing, otherwise don't show it. Okay, so I don't want a default text here. And this date, which is here at the bottom, we could kind of take it technically in the same line as the title. So let me group these two things, and we can do a justify space between. Okay, so now here is my date. That is too light. The dark one, the dark as a color is not really visible. So let me go with gray. So there's my title, there's my date, there's my link, and there's the tag. Okay. If I click on this, opens in a new tab. So that's done, that's done, that's done. Okay, perfect. So we have the link. Oh, hello, 404. And it's fine. Don't worry about it. Oh, thank you so much. Cool. So we have created a link card which should be like, which is kind of done. Okay, so all you need to do right now is create a very similar one for QA card. So you have to create a QA store, create a QA card, use it in project info, and that's it. That's done. Okay, so you would have completed everything that wanted to do right now, and you'll also learn in the process. So when you try to create the card, instead of copying it blindly, I would suggest try to oh, so there is one thing. This color is not lime. Okay, because a tag. Okay, so what we could do here is there a link tag in Mantine anchor? Oh, we could do this. So let's call this anchor tag. So instead of doing this whole link thing, let me call this anchor. Comes from Mantine. Link.notes will go in here. And let's remove this. So gradient from pink to yellow. Nah, don't need gradient. So what are my other variants? It will be text, let's say. And href would actually be my link.url. Oops, I did it in the wrong place. This was link.notes. I need to change it here. Let me copy this again. Okay, that's too much data there. Don't need this. All I need is href would be link.url. And in here, the text would also be the URL. The variant I can go for. Oh, and you can also do a target blank on this. We can change the underline to be only shown on hover. Okay, so that is nice. And the variant, I am curious about the variant. Can I change the color basically? Oh, yes. Deprecated, use C pro. Okay, cool. So I don't need this, and C equals to lime. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Yeah, there we go. Okay, on hover it shows example.com, and on click it takes to a new page, and it's always this. Perfect. So we have also improved our card. So try this out. Hopefully you will end up creating everything. But if you are unable to, that is fine. Just go over to this project, to this GitHub, and you should have the data posted there very soon. Let me also push everything that I have done till now. So we added routes, link data in session 3. Woo. So that's done, and everything is pushed. So you can find it in the front end folder, in src folder. Check what all has changed. So wherever this commit message is, you can also find all the commits that we have done right here by going into commits and see what changed, where to add, what to add. Okay. So that should give you a overview of what has changed over since yesterday till today. We have done session 1, 2, and 3. Now, before I end, any questions, anyone? If not, then I'm here again to request for feedback. So this was session 3. So go over to the form link that I have shared in the chat. This was building a Chrome extension part 3. Okay, choose that. Tell me, how did you like it, what did you not like? Any constructive criticism that I get, I'll try and work on those so that it becomes easier for you next time. So if I can improve in any way, please do let me know and I'll try and improve myself. uh, Other than that, I think this is perfectly, like, we are stopping at a very right position where you have exactly what you need to create one store on your own, one card on your own. And then once you have done that, the UI should basically work automatically. So there was this one stop extension, and there is also this one project resources extension. It should have the links. You can add more data, create your own data. You're going to store it on your MongoDB Atlas. So create your own data, add to it. Uh, yeah. And in like next 15 minutes, send like I'll push the latest changes for use link store and the use QA store. So try to do it on your own, but if it's becoming a hassle, then you can see the code that I am giving. And please spare 5 minutes to give the feedback. It will be really helpful for me, it will be helpful for the team to know how am I doing, and if there are any concerns, then I can try and rectify those. Okay, cool. So I'm going to stop at this point. It doesn't seem like there is any questions in the chat. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining, and I hope you have a good day. I have the next session kind of scheduled in GMT time today. Now you are going to join Aziman for a Bob Ross MS Paint mini event. So definitely join Aziman and have a fun time, chill time. This was pretty hectic. I'm sure this was hectic. So it's time for you to have a break, for you all to have a break. So definitely take that and enjoy. Cheers, everyone. And hello, Quackers and Cheese. You're welcome. I always have a smile when I read this username. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers. Bye bye. Enjoy.